What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. The theme in the Premier League this weekend is that we have finally gotten kind of our storyline and some clarity regarding this fascinating battle for the European spots and specifically the Champions League spots. Coming out of the international break, you had 10 teams that were very much still in the conversation. The three probably least likely, the teams you didn't expect to be there, Brighton, Bournemouth, Fulham, all lose midweek. Fulham beats Liverpool. I'll get to that in a little bit. But that is the only win in the 6 games those 3 teams played this week, where you have a Newcastle win, you have a couple Aston Villa wins, and so all of a sudden, this has very clearly developed into a 7-team race. Not only because the gap is now significantly bigger and there's a much more difficult path forward for Fulham, for example, even with the win over Liverpool, but it's also because now you have to jump all of these teams, and those teams, by the way, are a Villa team in terrific form, Manchester City, and Newcastle. And Newcastle, as I'm recording this, have 2 games in hand. And Villa goes and gets a really important win against Nottingham Forest. Forest poor in the first half, much better in the second. Probably should have ended 2-2 and split the points, but Villa hold on. So they get this huge win. While it's a bad week for those other 3 teams, these are the 7 best teams in the league. But you wondered if somebody might be able to really push these teams to the end. And then you talk about one of them finishing in 8th or 9th or something like that. I just don't see it happening anymore. I have no clue how this is going to play out between these 7 teams. But this is what we are, to me, this is the story. This is what we were talking about moving forward is, okay, 7 teams. It's almost guaranteed the Premier League is going to get one of those extra Champions League spots. So 7 teams, 5 spots. Obviously, Liverpool are going to get one. Arsenal are going to get one. Forest probably are going to get one, but they need to make sure of that. And then who knows what happens with those other teams. Relegation, pretty much decided. Title, pretty much decided. This is where we're at. This was kind of the week of clarification for this incredibly entertaining battle for those Champions League spots for European qualification. That is where the drama, the entertainment, the intrigue is going to be in the final month and a half of the season as well. Speaking of the title in Liverpool, it is a loss to Fulham. Liverpool go ahead in this game and then completely fall apart defensively. It also should be noted that they were shaky defensively from the opening 5 minutes of the game. Nearly conceded the goal, and I think it was the 4th minute, 5th minute, something like that, off of a bad defensive miscue. Obviously, that is not what you expect from this team. It was just strange, uncharacteristic stuff all over the place. It doesn't mean anything for me in terms of the title. I don't see any implications here. I'm not worried. This is why you build a big cushion. The one part of this, though, that I do think is worth highlighting for a second. This was never an all-time great team. There was this idea, and it's happened to Liverpool before, where because they went deep in the Carabao Cup, they were in the Champions League. They were playing really well in the Champions League in the initial part of it. They were starting to run away with the Premier League. That maybe they could do this and, quadruple, treble. Obviously, the FA Cup went by the wayside pretty quickly there. But basically in the competitions where they were playing their top guys, that they could win 3 of them. And of course it's possible, and you have to at least start kind of talking about it. But there was just so much more work to be done before we even got to that point. After you win the Carabao Cup, then maybe we can start talking about things. But they lost in the final. It happens. To me, this is not a commentary or some kind of blemish on this season. There's a reason why teams don't win trebles. And why teams, don't necessarily win the Champions League and their league, especially English teams, win the Premier League and the Champions League in the same season. Very, very good team. They're clearly the best team in the world. They had a horrible game. They did some weird things they don't normally do. Fulham punished them for it. It is a huge win for Fulham to keep any hope alive of making the Champions League. That made up for it. They got what they needed out of this week to at least stay in the hunt, even though I do think it's over for them, more because of the results of everybody else rather than theirs. They rescued this by winning this game. But it's just another reminder that this team is human. They're not a juggernaut. Nobody's really developed to challenge them. And so they lost for the first time in 26 Premier League games or whatever it was. And life goes on. Now, the difficult part is they don't have anything else to play for at this point. So they're just going to throw your best players out there every single week and try to wrap the title up as quickly as possible. So you just need to bounce back from this. This is why you build the cushion in the first place. Arsenal could not take advantage of this, even if they, there was a chance that, okay, had they lost Merseyside Derby, had they lost this game, had Arsenal won both games, maybe things get a little bit interesting. But Arsenal are correctly focusing on the Champions League. That is their best opportunity. That's where the priority should be. It gives Liverpool some extra breathing room. This loss just, to me, it's not going to be remembered at all unless somehow they fall apart down the stretch here, and I just don't see that happening. This, like the Carabao Cup loss, like the PSG loss to me, also, I'll throw that in there too, it's going to be a footnote in this season. This season is about new manager, completely unexpected, dominant run to a Premier League title. That is the most important thing. That is the hardest accomplishment in this sport. I will continue to stand by that. It's nothing more than that. It's nothing less than that. It's a terrific season that should be celebrated. It's not a historic one. This is not a historic team, and that's okay. Brought up Manchester City a little bit earlier, too. It is a uneventful 0-0 draw in the Manchester Derby. Another positive building block from Ruben Amorim, if you want to go that far. They could have won this game. You just got to continue to build any kind of positive performances. And there were things to like from a United perspective here. They certainly were not dominated and played off the field by any stretch of the imagination. And on the City side of this, okay, you don't have Haaland. Omar Marmoush comes in, doesn't have his best game. Nico O'Reilly continues to make a positive impact. But it was just another one of those games where City just kind of sit there with the ball. They don't create all that much. And we are now in a position where if Newcastle do what they are supposed to do and beat Leicester on Monday, they will be in fifth place. Manchester City will be outside of Champions League qualification for next season. And by the way, Newcastle still have a game in hand after that. This is becoming a very real possibility. I have always believed they are one of the top 5 teams in the Premier League. And this is really the first time where this is also part of the Haaland injury that maybe didn't get enough attention, is they have something to play for here. There is nothing guaranteed about being in the Champions League next season. And now you lost Haaland for some stretch of time here, when every game you're playing is incredibly important. And those drop points give Newcastle the opportunity to jump you. And then you're looking at, okay, can you catch Chelsea? Can you catch Newcastle? And by the way, you got to hold off Villa right behind you too. This is becoming very, very real. And I still will be stubborn and believe they find a way to do this. But this is becoming something to follow. And I feel like we all just kind of knew it wasn't City's season and the injuries and all this stuff. And, surely they'll find a way. It's not like they've been awful. They just haven't been up to City's standards. But it just has never gotten back to a point where it's clicking in gear here. And this is what we're talking about down the stretch here. There are 7 teams that are either currently in a top 5 position, still playing in the Champions League, if you're Villa, and also have the possibility of still lifting a trophy, or in the case of Newcastle, have lifted a trophy already this season. Right? These are the 2 teams, Villa and Newcastle, who have, at this point, for the purposes of this conversation, replaced Manchester United and Tottenham in the Big Six. I'm not saying that moving forward or long term, but for the purposes of this season, that the teams, if you look at the 6 most dangerous teams in the league, not necessarily the 6 best, but just generally the teams that people would fear heading into this season, to me, that is your top 6. And obviously, Forest have had a terrific season. They are one of the best 4 teams in the league. See if they can finish it out. But you get my point here of nobody expected that much out of Manchester United. Nobody expected potentially that much out of Spurs. The teams that you are scared of, if you see them coming up next week on the fixture list, are Villa and Newcastle, because of the money that they've been able to invest. That's who Manchester City is battling right now. And then you can throw Chelsea in there too. This is no guarantee. I still think City get it done. I've been consistent in that. But this is worth turning into and worth following in a season where there hasn't been all that much intrigue in the Premier League, because Liverpool ran away with things, because nobody's really solidified themselves. Finally, we have a little bit of clarity here in terms of what this Champions League battle is going to look like going down the stretch. Really excited to see how it turns out. That is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.